Hi, I'm Gill. I'm the head security nerd here at SolarWinds MSP, and this is the second video in our three-part series about securing users in a work-from-home environment. Now that you've been asked to empower these users to work from home, you're making sure that they can connect in, you're making sure that they can be productive, but you also need to make sure that they're secure. Now, in that last segment, what we talked about was making sure that the home environment is secure. Now, while you don't always have direct control over that, what you can do is advise those users how to operate more securely and things to pay attention to. In this particular segment, we're going to talk about the actual device that the user is using to access company resources and get their work done. Now, there are three different scenarios you're likely going to be dealing with here. The first is a company-owned laptop that the user takes home. Well, it's pretty likely you already have monitoring and management of that device set up, as well as some of the core security, such as endpoint protection, patch management, making sure that that device is safe. Now, of course, they may also be accessing some cloud resources, Office 365 or document management. So you want to make sure that in those situations you are adding in additional two-factor authentication, for example, in a conditional access rule in Office 365. Since they're out of the office, you want to make sure that they authenticate with that second factor to protect the account information. Additionally, if they're using a VPN to access corporate resources, you're going to want to make sure that has that second factor of authentication as well. The other scenario could be that they're using that home computer to simply access another machine back into the network. There's a few ways that you could accomplish this. The first would be a commercial remote control tool, much like Take Control Plus, for example. They could then be required to authenticate to that platform before they're granted access to that internal resource, and of course be challenged with that second factor, which is much more secure. You could also go the route of supplying them with a VPN client that they are challenged on that second factor. Then they're granted access to the network and then can remote into the system by, for example, remote desktop. The third one, which is one I don't really recommend, is using a remote desktop gateway. Now, if you do decide to configure a remote desktop gateway, there are a few considerations. The first is you're going to want to make sure that it is up to date on all of its patches. Secondarily, you're going to want to use firewall rules in front of that so that you're essentially only granting access to the IP addresses of those home users that need to access it, and it's not open to the world. Regardless, one thing you should not do is simply forward ports into an RDP system inside the network. That is inherently insecure. A lot of bad actors are looking for the existence of RDP on ports so that they can exploit that vulnerability. So definitely make sure that you're not doing that. Give them a secure way to remote back into the environment. Now, in the home user using their own system situation, there are a few considerations. You don't really know what endpoint protection is being used on that device. You don't know the patch state of that device. So the first discussion you should really have is maybe I should be installing a monitoring agent on those devices. This will allow you to then be able to support and make sure that that workstation is absolutely secure. You can see the patch state, you can monitor the endpoint protection. Now, there is another thing to consider. During this time, maybe you want to install your endpoint protection on that device so that you can have better visibility into the security state. If you do go down this route, make sure that you document all of those changes so that you can undo them when the time comes to get back to work and get back to whatever our new normal will be. So at the end of the day, there are three core things you have to make sure you're doing for your users. One is your mail protection is configured and protecting against phishing emails and malicious attachments that they might click on these systems. The second one is making sure that those systems are patched and up to date. And finally, that you have current, up-to-date, functioning endpoint protection. On top of that, there are a few additional layers that you can protect as well. You should be blocking access to malicious URLs. You could do that either via a monitoring agent that is blocking malicious URLs. You could leverage an endpoint protection that has URL filtering built in, or you could even use a DNS-based service, whatever is required to make sure that you're preventing access to these malicious URLs. And on top of that, you're going to want to encourage that they have a work-only user and they don't share that system while they're using it for work. The final thing is to make sure that the users are aware of the types of risks that are out there during this time of elevated risk with the coronavirus and a lot of the scams that are going around. That's going to be the topic of our next video, part 3 in this series. You can follow me on Twitter. My handle is @cybersec_nerd. That's somewhere where I'll be posting different blog posts or articles that may be of interest to managed service providers when it comes to security. And as always, let's stay safe out there, and thanks for watching.